You know, holidays are supposed to be fun, right? Sunshine, ice cream, beaches, or at least something exciting. But imagine being told you're going to spend your summer in the middle of a field. No Wi-Fi, no theme parks, no buzz of city life. Just endless grass, sheep, and an old cottage in some forgotten village. That's exactly what happened to Sophia and Max, twins from London, full of energy and curiosity. They weren't thrilled about this escape to the countryside. It sounded more like punishment than vacation. But as soon as they arrived, something felt off. It wasn't the scenery. It was actually quite beautiful. Rolling green hills, pretty cottages, flowers swaying in the breeze. It looked like something from a postcard. But under that peaceful surface, there was something strange in the air. Something you couldn't quite see, but definitely feel. And that's where everything started to change. Sophia looked at the map and couldn't believe it. "We're in the middle of nowhere," she muttered. Max, equally unimpressed, just sighed. It was the kind of place that felt stuck in time. No noise, no people around, not even a passing car. Their parents were excited, of course. They wanted peace, relaxation, time to breathe. But for two kids used to movement and adventure, the idea of doing nothing was unbearable. That first night, they tried to settle in. The cottage creaked with every step. The air smelled of wood smoke and old books. It felt more like stepping into a story than a holiday, and maybe that was the first clue, because what began as boredom slowly turned into curiosity, and that curiosity, that's what led Sophia and Max into the mystery that would define their summer. The next morning, more strange things unfolded. A caretaker showed up, grumpy and vague, warning them about someone named Mrs. Black. He didn't explain, just dropped the name like a curse and walked off. Then, hours later, a cheerful woman arrived, claiming to be that very same Mrs. Black. She smiled too wide. She talked too much. She offered to cook, clean, and take care of everything. Too perfect. And that's when the twins really started paying attention. They noticed things, the way people in the village looked at them, like outsiders, unwelcome and unwanted. The way the local shopkeeper warned them to remember it's not a good idea to be there. The way Mrs. Black always seemed to know where everyone was, what they were doing, what they were thinking. Suddenly, the village didn't feel sleepy anymore. It felt secretive. They weren't just on a holiday. They were part of something bigger, something hidden, and you could feel that shift in them, especially Sophia, the way her eyes lit up not with fear, but with that spark only a real mystery can bring. Max, too, always quick with a joke, now a little quieter, a little more focused. Their bond as twins gave them something special, an unspoken way of understanding each other, finishing thoughts, sensing danger without saying a word. This wasn't the holiday they expected, but maybe that's the point. The most powerful stories begin where everything feels normal, until it doesn't, and that field they thought was empty. It held stories buried deep in time, stories that someone didn't want discovered. Sophia and Max were about to learn that mystery doesn't need a haunted castle or a dark forest. Sometimes it lives in sunlight, behind polite smiles, inside cottages with creaky floors and locked drawers. And once they stepped into that world, there was no going back. They were no longer just visitors. They were part of the story now. It's strange how places can hide things. You walk into a room, a house, a village, and everything seems ordinary. But that's just it. Sometimes the most mysterious places are the ones that try hardest to look normal. And this cottage, this little house in the middle of a quiet English village, it was anything but normal. At first glance, it was charming. 4 bedrooms, a wide kitchen, ivy climbing up the stone walls. The kind of place that should smell of lavender and fresh bread. the kind of place people dream of retiring to. But the moment you stepped through the front door, you could tell something was off. It was too quiet. The air didn't move right. The rooms felt like they were watching you back. Sophia and Max didn't say anything at first. Maybe they didn't want to ruin the trip, or maybe they couldn't put it into words, but you could see it in the way they paused before going upstairs, the way they checked the corners of rooms, that quiet tension. Like their instincts were trying to tell them something their minds hadn't figured out yet. And the village, it wasn't just peaceful, it was frozen. Every street looked like it hadn't changed in 100 years. The post office, the bakery, the newsagent, they all had that eerie, too perfect feeling. Even the people there carried it in their eyes. The way they looked at Sophia and Max when they walked by, cold, guarded, like they were hiding something they weren't ready to explain. That's when things really started to unfold. It wasn't long before the twins met a man in a suit with a strange tie. He seemed friendly enough, but the questions he asked didn't feel casual. They felt targeted. Focused, he wanted to know who they were with, what their family was doing there. And he was especially interested in anything to do with that old book, one full of symbols, secrets, and codes that seemed to point straight to Stonehenge. And then there was the cottage caretaker, a gruff old man who appeared out of nowhere just to mutter a warning about a woman named Mrs. Black. He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. The way he said her name made your stomach twist. And that's when the story flipped from quiet holiday to quiet danger. Because that's the thing. No one was ready for what that cottage was hiding. Not Sophia, not Max, and definitely not the people in that village, who had spent years pretending there was nothing unusual about it. But the cottage remembered. Old cottages like that don't forget. They soak in the voices, the secrets, the arguments whispered behind closed doors. They hold on to what's left behind, the scratched floorboards, the strange markings on windowsills, the loose stones in the wall that cover hidden things. And this one, it was full of memories that didn't want to stay buried. Sophia found herself drawn to certain corners of the house, certain bookshelves and drawers. Max kept thinking about the brooch they'd discovered, the one with a strange triangle and a cross on it. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both knew it wasn't just decoration. It was a key, a piece of something bigger, and the more they looked around, the more they realized they weren't the only ones looking. Someone else was watching the house. Someone else knew what was inside. It all started to come together. The strange symbols in the book. The people who kept showing up with too many questions. The quiet rooms in the cottage that felt like they had something to say. None of it was random, and none of it was safe. What should have been a place of rest turned into the center of something dangerous. A crossroads between past and present, between the sacred and the stolen. Something ancient was hidden there, something powerful. And that small, quiet cottage, it had guarded its secret for centuries. But now that Sophia and Max were inside, the silence had finally broken. You know that feeling when someone looks at you like they know something you don't. That unsettling chill that creeps in when a smile doesn't reach the eyes. That's exactly what Sophia and Max began to notice after just a day in the village. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but there was tension everywhere they turned. It hung in the air like fog. The first time they felt it was in the local shop. They walked in like any normal kids, friendly smiles, just looking to buy something to drink. But the woman behind the counter didn't smile back. She didn't ask where they were from, didn't make small talk like most villagers would. She looked at them, really looked at them, with a kind of coldness that said, "You don't belong here," and then she said it out loud. "Tourists don't usually come to Stone Cross. Not welcome, not enjoy your stay." Just that, a warning wrapped in politeness, and that wasn't the only time. Everywhere they went, someone was watching. Not always directly, not in a way you could accuse, but enough that the back of your neck stayed tight. It was like everyone in the village knew something, and no one wanted to say it. Eyes followed them in silence. Conversations stopped when they walked by, and the whispers always came just a second too late to catch the words, but early enough to feel their weight. Then came the housekeeper. She arrived on the first day, calling herself Mrs. Black, an old woman with rosy cheeks and a big laugh, always offering to cook something or help with the cleaning. She was the kind of person who smiled too wide, who offered too much too soon. At first it seemed harmless, maybe even kind, but Sophia noticed how she always seemed to know who was in what room, how she always knew what was going on in the house, even when no one had told her. And Max spotted something too, her earrings, silver, dangling, marked with a strange symbol he recognized from somewhere, but couldn't place at first. It was little things that started stacking up. Like the way Mrs. Black showed up in the study late at night, claiming to have lost her car keys, but she didn't own a car, or how she always managed to show up right after something odd happened, with an excuse ready and a plate of biscuits in hand. She was always pleasant, always helpful, but behind that there was something calculated, something off, and then there was the man in the suit, Martin Knight. He didn't seem part of the village, too polished, too controlled. He introduced himself kindly, asked all the right questions, but his interest wasn't in the village or the twins. It was in what their family was doing there, in what secrets they might be holding. He seemed particularly interested in what they knew about history, about symbols, about books. And the way he smiled when they mentioned anything about their uncle's research. That smile said more than any words could. Both Mrs. Black and Martin Knight acted like separate people, but it didn't take long before Sophia and Max realized they were connected. They saw them once, talking on the hill beneath the stone cross, whispering, watching, disappearing the moment anyone got close. It was like the village itself had chosen sides, and Sophia and Max were standing in the wrong place. It wasn't just a strange holiday anymore. It wasn't just a mystery. It was beginning to feel dangerous. The people around them weren't simply unfriendly. They were hiding something, and Sophia, with that quiet sharpness she always carried, felt it before anyone said it aloud. Max, curious and quick, picked up on it too. These weren't just villagers keeping to themselves. These were people trying to protect something, or hide it, and every cold stare, every too sweet smile, was a sign that the truth was buried deeper than anyone expected. It started as just a strange little design, a triangle, a circle, and a kind of twisted cross in the center. Nothing big, nothing dramatic. Just a silver brooch Sophia found under a pile of papers in the cottage. It could have been part of someone's jewelry collection. It could have been nothing, but it wasn't. The moment she showed it to Max, something clicked between them. He'd seen it too, not on the floor or in a book, but on someone. That same exact symbol, and once they started paying attention, it began showing up more and more. First, it was on Mrs. Black. Her silver earrings, pretty and delicate, carried that same symbol, small but unmistakable. Sophia had seen them flash in the sunlight one day and felt that same twist in her stomach she always got when something felt wrong. She didn't say anything at the time. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But then Max remembered Martin Knight's tie. Black, neat, professional, but decorated with a subtle repeating pattern, and hidden among the threads, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was that exact same shape. Triangle, circle, and cross, too much to be a coincidence. They started thinking, why would two people who claimed to be strangers wear the same obscure symbol? And more than that, why would that symbol also appear in the book their uncle was studying? A book filled with ancient mysteries, codes, and diagrams connected to places like Stonehenge. That's when things started to fall into place. The symbol wasn't new. It wasn't just decoration. It was old ancient even, and it held meaning. Real meaning. Their uncle's notes described how certain symbols were once used to mark places of energy or power or communication. Some thought they were maps. Others believed they were codes. But what stood out most was the idea that these symbols weren't just historical. They were functional. Sophia and Max knew the cottage wasn't just some random rental. It was placed there right in the center of a field, surrounded by hills that formed a triangle if you looked at them from above. Just like the symbol, the village of Stonecross, they realized, got its name from the carved stone cross standing high on the hill behind the cottage, a cross that looked almost exactly like the one etched into the center of that strange little brooch. And of course Stonehenge. When they visited, they finally saw the last piece of the puzzle, the enormous circle of stones, the triangle of hills surrounding it. It was like the land itself had been shaped to match that symbol, like someone long ago had carved it into the earth. A symbol that connected places across time, from the cottage to the village to the stones. It wasn't just geometry, it wasn't just design, it was a signal, and suddenly they understood why people like Mrs. Black and Martin Knight were so interested in the book. Why they were following the twins, why they broke into the cottage and searched every room but left behind money and jewels, because what they wanted wasn't valuable in a normal sense, it was powerful. It was knowledge, and knowledge like that, when connected to something ancient like Stonehenge, could lead to things beyond imagination. Sophia started remembering little things. The way the villagers avoided questions, the way everyone talked about stone. Henge like it was just a pile of rocks, when really deep down they all knew it was more. It wasn't just a tourist site. It was a key, a machine, or maybe even a message waiting to be unlocked. And Max, always thinking ahead, realized the danger. If this symbol really did connect everything, the people, the place, the history, then someone using it for the wrong reason could control something far bigger than anyone ever expected. That's what they were protecting. That's what was hidden in the jewelry, the clothing, the architecture of the land itself. What they thought was just decoration turned out to be a doorway, and once it was opened, there was no turning back. They say you can always tell what someone truly wants by what they're willing to steal, and in this case it wasn't gold, it wasn't art, it wasn't even technology. It was something far older, far more dangerous, and so easy to overlook if you didn't know what to look for. A book, it happened late one evening, the kind of night that hums with silence, where every creak of the floorboards sounds louder than it should. Max had just gone downstairs for a glass of water. He didn't expect anything unusual, just a cold drink and maybe a peek at the stars. But when he reached the kitchen, something felt off. The window over the sink, usually locked, was cracked open just slightly, too slightly, like someone had carefully slid it open, just enough to slip in. Sophia came down seconds later, barefoot and alert. She noticed it too. The breeze was different, sharp, nervous. That's when they heard it, the soft sound of footsteps in the study. Max whispered, "It's not Mum or Dad," and Sophia, already reaching for the heavy brass candlestick from the mantel, didn't have to say it aloud. They both knew. Someone was inside. They crept toward the study door, slow and silent, hearts pounding. But by the time they got there, the room was empty. Not just empty, disturbed. The desk drawers had been pulled out, the bookshelf had been picked through, cushions tossed, rugs pulled halfway back, but nothing was missing, not visibly. Their parents' wallets were untouched on the side table, jewelry still in the drawer upstairs. Electronics, camera, phone, laptop, still in place. That's when Sophia noticed the gap on the shelf. There had been a leather-bound book, old, cracked at the edges. It had belonged to their uncle, a man whose fascination with history was matched only by his obsession with what he called in-between truths, the things hidden just out of sight in myths and symbols. The book had been passed down, protected, full of diagrams, cryptic languages, strange maps, and something resembling instructions. Instructions for what? No one was quite sure, not yet, and now it was gone. That was the moment the game changed. This wasn't just about creepy villagers or suspicious housekeepers anymore. Someone had broken into their home to take a specific object, a book most people wouldn't have glanced at twice, which meant the thief knew exactly what they were looking for, and more terrifying than that, they knew where to find it. Max remembered what Martin Knight had asked earlier that week about the family's connection to old studies, ancient texts, secret societies. He'd acted casual, but it was clear now that he knew more than he was letting on, and Mrs. Black, always lurking nearby with her warm tea and wide smile. She had been in that study more than once. She had even asked about the book herself, disguised as idle curiosity. The twins checked everything. They took inventory. They searched the rest of the house, but it was only that book that was missing, and that told them everything they needed to know. Whoever broke in didn't want valuables. They wanted answers, knowledge. They were chasing something hidden in the pages of that old volume. Something big enough to risk exposure, to sneak into a guarded cottage, to search through the night without leaving a trace. Sophia started piecing it together, the symbol in the brooch, the strange behavior of the townspeople, the coded passages their uncle used to obsess over. They weren't just random coincidences. They were pieces of a puzzle stretching back centuries, and that book, it was the key. Max, flipping through a backup journal they found hidden under a floorboard, found references to something called the fifth pattern, a kind of alignment that occurred only once every 1,000 years, connecting certain places across the earth, Stonehenge being one of them, and the book, now stolen, was the only complete source explaining how to read it. That's what the intruder was after, not just knowledge, but a blueprint to something ancient, to something powerful, maybe even dangerous. And now, with that book in the wrong hands, whatever secrets it guarded were no longer secrets at all. They didn't have much time. The book was gone, the villagers were silent, and the storm that had been building for days, both in the sky and in the story, was finally beginning to break. But what they did have was each other, and somehow that was enough. Sophia had been thinking it through for hours. She'd gone over the symbols again and again, retracing their steps from the cottage to the stone cross, from the brooch to the map carved into the book's final pages. She remembered the journal entry, hastily scribbled by their uncle months before his disappearance. The true activation doesn't happen at the stones. It happens beneath them. That sentence kept echoing, and she realized then, if the book had instructions, and if someone was trying to follow them, they would have to go to the one place where truth and myth blurred together. Underneath Stonehenge, Max was already packing the backpack, flashlight, rope, compass, snacks, just in case, not because he wasn't scared, but because fear never stopped him from acting. That was his strength. He didn't freeze, he moved, and in this case they had to move quickly. They knew Mrs. Black and Martin Knight would be there. They knew they'd try to use the book. But they also knew something the others didn't, how to disrupt the pattern. At the site, the guards had cleared out, called off under the guise of maintenance. It was dark now, late, and the moonlight scattered shadows across the ancient stones. Sophia and Max crept through the broken fence. Careful not to make a sound, they knew the layout, they'd studied it. They headed straight for the western arch, where their uncle had marked a hidden stairwell sealed with a slab, and sure enough, it was open. The descent into the earth felt like stepping into time itself. Cold walls pressed in, The air thick and still. Their flashlights caught flickers of strange carvings, symbols matching the ones on the brooch, the tie, the pages of the missing book. Every step deeper made the mystery feel heavier, realer, no longer theory or folklore, but something alive. They heard voices before they saw them. Mrs. Black and Martin were already there, the book opened on a pedestal carved straight into the stone. Candles flickered. Something was humming, a low vibration in the floor like gears turning underground. Whatever they were doing. It had started. Max whispered, "Now or never." Sophia didn't hesitate. She stepped into the light, not hiding. "Not anymore. You're using it wrong," she said. Mrs. Black turned slowly, eyes wide. Not in surprise that Sophia was there, but in realization. "You've read it," she said. "You understood." Sophia nodded. "Enough to know you're triggering the pattern too early. The energy isn't aligned yet. You'll collapse it instead of opening it." Martin didn't believe her. He called it bluff, but even then he hesitated. Max took that moment. He lunged for the book, grabbed it, tore the page loose that acted as the cipher. The candles flickered wildly. The humming turned to a rumble. Stones above groaned like they were waking up or breaking down. Mrs. Black shouted, reaching forward. But Sophia stepped between them. "It was never yours," she said, "and if you'd understood what this meant, you'd never have tried." The cave began to shift. The vibration turned into a windless roar. Ancient mechanisms grinding to a halt, or maybe to a reset. Sophia dropped the torn page into the torch flame. The cipher burned instantly. Whatever connection they were trying to make, it was over. Max looked at her. "Are we safe now?" She looked at the stone pedestal, the now useless book, the stunned silence of the people who'd chased power they didn't understand. "We are," she said, "because we chose not to use it." Later, the authorities found nothing unusual, just a group of confused tourists trespassing at an ancient site. But Sophia and Max knew the truth. They had stood on the edge of something enormous, something forgotten, and they had chosen to close the door instead of opening it. Sometimes the real strength lies not in unlocking a secret, but in knowing when to let it remain one. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey with Sophia and Max, a simple holiday that unraveled into a race against ancient forces. From symbols and secrets to trust and courage, their bond turned mystery into meaning. And as the stones returned to silence, one truth stood clear. Some stories aren't meant to be solved, only remembered.